Welcome to the module on Protozoa. In this talk, we're going to learn about general features of these organisms. We will begin with learning about eukaryotic parasites and then focus on protists. We will then learn about the different types of animal-like protists, which are called as protozoa, and then learn about the different structures like pseudopodia, flagella, and cilia that they use to move around. Different eukaryotic organisms are able to cause infections and hence are referred to as eukaryotic parasites. These include protozoa, helminths, and parasitic lice. Protozoa are organisms that come under the kingdom of protists, and they are usually unicellular. Helminths are worms that are multicellular, and parasitic lice usually are insects. In this talk, we're going to focus on the protozoa that are able to cause infections. Protists are organisms that evolved from archaebacteria, and they are eukaryotes that belong to the domain of eukarya and the kingdom of Protista. They mostly comprise of unicellular organisms, even though there are some multicellular members. And it should be noted that Protista is the most diverse kingdom. It's considered as the most diverse kingdom because of the variety of organisms that are present in it. These include the fungi-like organisms that have a cell wall but are heterotrophs. You also have plant-like organisms in the kingdom of Protista, which also have a cell wall, but they are autotrophs, which means they're able to synthesize their own carbon sources for energy. These include organisms like diatoms, the dinoflagellates, and the volvox. We also have the different types of algae like the green algae, the red algae, or the brown algae, and they all belong to the kingdom of Protista. We also have animal-like organisms in the kingdom of Protista, and these are mostly unicellular organisms that do not have a cell wall, and they are heterotrophs. These include organisms like Sporozoa that are able to make spores, the ciliates like Paramecium and Tetrahymena that have cilia that allow them to move, the zooflagellates that have flagella to help with locomotion, and then the pseudopods like amoeba that have the structures called as pseudopods which allow them to move. Animal-like protists are also called as protozoa. Protozoans are a significant source of disease as millions of people contract and suffer from infections caused by protozoa. For example, 10% of the world's population is infected with the protozoan Entamoeba histolytica. On the other hand, 16 million are infected with the protozoan Trypanosoma. Each year, more than 500 million are infected with Plasmodium, which causes malaria. And of those 500 million, approximately 2 million die every year. In fact, 2.5 billion people live in places in the world where malaria is endemic. And thus, we can see that protozoa are able to cause many different types of infections that result in a huge toll on people's health. Protozoa that cause infections are able to gain entry into the host through a variety of mechanisms. These include the ingestion of food or water, and an example of such a protozoan is Entamoeba histolytica. This is a protozoan that causes the disease amoebiasis. Protozoa can also enter through physical or sexual contact, and an example of this is Trichomonas vaginalis that causes the disease trichomoniasis. Protozoan can also gain entry into a host through vectors like arthropods, and this is usually done through insect bites. Plasmodium, which causes malaria, and Trypanosoma, which causes the sleeping sickness, are both able to gain entry into the host through these insect bites.
Now let us look more into the structure of protozoans. So they're unicellular organisms and they don't have a cell wall. They're heterotrophs, which means they can't make their own food, unlike plants. And they usually are facultative anaerobes. When we look at the size of the protozoans, they can range from 2 to 100 micrometers. They engulf food through the process of phagocytosis or through pinocytosis. And when we look at the stages of protozoans, some of them can have two stages. One stage is called as the trophozoid, and in this case, the protozoan is active and metabolically operational. It can grow and reproduce. However, there is another stage, which is the cyst stage, and in this case, the protozoan is dormant, and it's able to protect itself from environmental challenges.
Protozoa are able to move, and they show a variety of mechanisms that aid in movement. In fact, based on the mechanism of movement, protozoa can be classified into different groups. The first group are the amoeboids, which are able to move through the cytoplasmic projections called as pseudopodia. The literal translation of pseudopodia is false feet. They are the cytoplasmic projections that are normally formed through the reorganization of the cytoplasmic protein actin. Actin is a cytoskeletal protein that can form polymers, and the formation of this polymeric actin helps in the formation of cytoplasmic projections that are the pseudopodia. Ciliates are protozoa that are able to move with the help of hair-like projections that are present on the cell surface that are called as cilia. Flagellates, on the other hand, are protozoa that are able to move with flagella. Cilia and flagella are quite similar, but some of the key differences are that flagella are longer and cilia are more numerous. Eukaryotic flagella and cilia are structurally similar to one another. However, they are structurally different than the prokaryotic, especially bacterial flagella. Now, when we look at the bacterial flagella, it's made up of three parts, which is the filament, the hook, and the basal body. The basal body is anchored to the cell membrane. However, the cell membrane does not cover the basal body or the other parts of the flagella. In the case of eukaryotic flagella and cilia, they are covered in their entirety by the plasma membrane. When we look at the composition of the flagella and cilia, they are made of microtubules. On the other hand, bacterial flagella are made up of flagellin, especially in the filament portion of the flagella. The microtubules, in the case of protozoa, are arranged in a 9+2 arrangement, and thus we are able to see this 9+2 arrangement in both flagella as well as cilia. To have a better view of the arrangement, let us look at the figure, and in the center, we are able to observe a pair of microtubules, and these are the central microtubules that are also called as the axoneme. Surrounding this pair of microtubules, there are 9 outer doublets of microtubules. And thus, we say that there is a 9+2 arrangement. Eukaryotic flagella and cilia have a basal body, and this basal body is called as a kinetosome. It is different from the basal body that is found in the flagella of bacteria because it does not act as a motor. On the other hand, it acts as a microtubule organizing center. And thus, its function is similar to that of centrioles that are present in the cell that can form the mitotic spindle during the process of cell division. Sporozoans are protozoa that do not have pseudopodia, cilia, or flagella. They are able to move around through a gliding motion, and one of their characteristics is their ability to form spores. With this, we come to the end of our talk, where we learned about different types of eukaryotic parasites, which include the protozoa, helminths, and parasitic lice. We also learned about the characteristics of protists and the different types of protozoa based on locomotory patterns. We also learned about how pseudopodia are formed and the structure of eukaryotic flagella and cilia and how they are different from bacterial flagella.